the three main parts of life are health, wealth, and relationships, right? If you have a little bit of competence and confidence in the money-making field, in the health field of your life, and then in relationships or the bedroom, then that's a solid foundation, right? I had $13 across 3 bank accounts. In the whole world, I had $13, and I remember this, and this was my first week in Los Angeles. I was in a brand new place, trying to break into this industry, or basically on my way to break into the industry. And went from that to making 7 figures plus. If there was like a list, like a bullet point list of things that young men should like work on maxing out, it's like delayed gratification, discipline, and like extreme ownership. Like everything is your fault. Everything is your responsibility. Everything in your life.
All right, man. Let's kick off. So I want to start with a quote from yourself that I picked up from your Instagram. So if you can speak, you can influence. If you can influence, you can change lives. How important has that been in your career so far?
Yeah, sometimes I forget some of the really insightful things I say. You know what? I think being able to impact other people's lives is what gives people fulfillment. People derive a lot of, let's say, for example, people will derive a lot of fulfillment in their life from having a family, from having kids, right? So what is that? You're able to directly impact the growth and the development of an individual, aka your kids, right? And there's also legacy tied into that too. But when you look at anyone, other people who have big corporations, who maybe have big brands, have big influence in some way, the ability to affect other people's lives, and in particular the ability to help other people's lives, creates a massive sense of fulfillment. And I think because there's two different kinds of content creators that you see on the internet today. There's like people who are purely entertainment, people who are they're just doing things for like views and clicks and reactions and doing stupid TikTok dances and crap like that. Okay, so that's entertainment, right? They're still getting it. They're still getting people's attention, and they're probably still talking a bit and garnering that. But then there's a whole host of other content creators who are really just trying to help people and who are trying to like solve problems for other people, trying to help people through tough times, give them some direction, give them some advice. And I personally think that those people, because I'm one of them, are extremely happy and extremely fulfilled in their life, and I consider it an absolute blessing to have ended up in the situation that I'm in now. I couldn't have imagined 10 years ago I'd be here.
Exactly, but I always explain the fact that it's like there's education and there's entertainment, and where you are is like you're more on the education side, but you bring in the nice entertainment element so that people can like listen and jump in and out and go back to back with your content, which is like that's the beauty of it,
You kind of have to. People have very, very short attention spans these days. You don't really, so you're kind of fighting that all the time, right? As a content creator, and you don't really. It's raw. It's brutal. Like the numbers don't lie. If you make something and no one sees it, it's because it was shit. It really 100%. Was. It wasn't able to grab someone's attention, right? So you need to have that personality, that relatability, whatever it is that it's about, like some kind of X factor, right? With you, either you're really, really funny, you're really, really charming, like maybe you're really relatable. There's something there that allows people to connect with you, resonate with you, and want to listen to you again and again.
And man, you've learned that from obviously what you're doing recently, and then way back to the beginning of your career when you were in the whole porn industry. Like the fact that you're able to grab that literal attention is fucking mad, So I want to kind of go back a small bit and actually focus more on like younger people first. So like, what do you think like younger people in their 20s should be focusing on?
I think that if I knew the stuff I know now when I was in my 20s, man, I wouldn't have taken the same life path, obviously, but I would be light years ahead, man. I think especially as a young man, learning business skills, learning things like practical, like hands-on experience with like marketing, sales, like cold call sales or door-to-door sales, like really, really tough skill sets. If you can master that stuff as a young man, you are going to be loaded. You are going to be so rich that problem is money is never going to be a problem. Learning marketing skills, learning valuable like things that you can lend your time to other people with, like video editing, thumbnail editing, whatever. obviously you can see like the creator space is really growing right now. So there's obviously got a lot of like adjacent work that plugs into that. I know because I hire a bunch of people who do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for young guys, like realizing, okay, well first of all, like, and most people would say yes to this. Do you want to live a life that's relatively location free? Do you want to live a life where you have good disposable income? I would encourage people to pursue that because it makes life a lot less stressful. When you don't have to worry about bills, it's amazing. Uh, I've gone from worrying about bills. I've gone from having like
Mm-hmm.
13. Bro, I remember it wasn't that long ago. I had $13 in my bank account. Actually,
What?
$13. Actually, I'll tell you, that's a lie. I had $13 across 3 bank accounts, across in
From
the
doing
whole
what?
world. Yeah, in the whole world, I had $13, and I remember this, and this was my first week in Los Angeles. I was in a brand new place, trying
What?
to break into this industry, or basically on my way to break into the industry, and like went from that to making 7 figures plus, over the last 2 years, and
Mm-hmm.
so that not a very long space of time either. Like, so I've been there. I've seen what it's like to not be able to afford bills, to stress about that, and I'm grateful that I don't have to do that anymore. So again, I'd
100%.
encourage young men to pursue money because if you can learn to make money as a young man, if you can learn to be valuable to other people, that's the
Mm-hmm.
primary thing. I think Elon Musk has a really good quote, something along the lines of the amount of money you earn will be directly proportionate to the complexity of the problems that you solve for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can be a problem solver, and this is actually something I've heard from my early mentors in my 20s, which was, thinking of thinking of money as compressed time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I want to make money, I have to save somebody time because time is a finite resource. We never get it back. And how do I save someone time? I solve problems for them. I make a process easier with requiring less energy, a process requiring less focus, or I just do the job for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I can save somebody time, I can solve problems for them. I will be valuable, and I will receive money for that. That fundamental understanding of how money is made, and that exchange of money, is very, very valuable. And that's real, actual wealth. That's real money. That's not like, like usury economic arbitrage, like lending, borrowing, like interest rates and stuff like that. That's real world value. That's what people actually.
Application.
Yeah, and people respect that a lot too. People respect that a lot more. So
When was that inflection point for you? Because, like, of course, like, take me back a small bit. When you're just coming out of the porn industry, or when you're even in it, like, now you're such a knowledgeable dude who's literally has like decades of experience. But when was that inflection point? They're like, "Fuck, all right, this is like how I'm actually going to make money. This is how I'm going to scale things up."
you know what? I wasn't even. I didn't even comprehend that it could get to the point where it's gotten to now. It was
Mhm.
literally a case of COVID hit and the industry stopped shooting. So like no one could shoot. So
Yeah.
it was like, all right, well, and I'd been working on my first book for like 6 months prior to that. I just had
Mhm.
because basically I'd kind of biohacked my way into the porn industry in a way,
Mhm.
and I was constantly like borrowing from like other like male performers, like, hey, what do you eat? What's your workout like? What supplements do you take? Like this XYZ. I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly can about like the general habits and routines and supplementation and nutrient and like everything, their lifestyle, everything I can about from guys who've got more experience than me in this industry. And okay, if they're doing, and I'm seeing like what are the commonalities? What does this
Mhm.
guy and this 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 guy all do that's in common? Okay, then I should definitely do that thing, you know. So
Mhm.
that's how I ended up biohacking my way into like bigger and better roles and getting award nominations and eventually winning. And then COVID hit, and I had this just document that I've been accumulating for my whole career of like all these little biohacks. And I was
Mhm.
like, all right, I'll just start compile. I'll just write these into a book. And I had a few guys, like a few fans and stuff, DMing me questions about like boner problems and premature ejaculation problems and things like that. So I thought, okay, like I saw an opportunity. I was like, all right, cool. I'm not getting paid right now because I can't shoot. I'll push this book out, and then there's at least that I might be able to make like a few $100s here and there, like a little bit of money here and there, just to tide me over.
Mhm.
And that spiraled into like where I'm at now, which is far greater and far beyond my imagination could have possibly taken me at the time. I'm very, very happy and very grateful for it.
Man, how did you get into porn when like you could have? It seems like you had like many different options. Like, what was the catalyst for that? Because like I feel like you could have done anything.
Yeah, I guess the catalyst for it was because it was so absurd and it was so uh, it just seemed like an impossible goal because I'm from a 3,000 person farming town in rural Western Australia.
Proper outback, fucking
I'm from the
zero.
outback.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
There's no film industry, there's no erotic film industry where I'm from. Uh, so it just seemed so absurd. And I like absurd goals. I just like it. I like to do things that no one else has done. I like to do things that no one thinks I can do. If someone tells me you can't do that, like, oh, that's impossible. My whole life, I've just gone out and proven people wrong, and
Why?
that just gives me energy. I just enjoy that. I call it like fuck you energy. Like if you tell
Mm,
me there's no way you could possibly do that, Sterling, all right, fuck you. I'm going to go prove you wrong, and
mm,
I feed off of that. Um, so that was kind of where the inspiration came from. Oddly enough, I was actually running a like a paleo meal delivery business at the time back in Western Australia. We were doing all right. We were pulling in over $500,000 a year, and but I'd gotten to the point where I kind of built a prison for myself in a way.
mm,
I didn't know about the business systems I know now in terms of like leveraging yourself and replacing yourself so you can grow and scale a business better. I was very too hands on in the business, and we'd kind of reached like a market cap in our city. Perth is the most isolated capital city in the world, oddly enough. It's only like 2 million people. Logistics in Australia are trash, so you can't ship things across the country, and like you can do in America.
I can
And
imagine.
so that was the case there. I had conflicts with my business partner as well, and I was, high stress, high workload, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why am I doing this? Like, what's the purpose? Like, what is my actual end goal? And I was honest with myself, and I said, look, I want to make money so I can travel around the world having sex with gorgeous women. I'm just being honest with myself. Like, and I think a lot of people are in
100%.
denial about that. I think that's what most men are doing this for. Honestly,
Mhm,
if they really drill down, like layer upon layer upon layer, drill down. Like, if you just keep asking why, it's like, oh, I
mhm,
want to make money. Why? Oh, so I don't have to stress about things. Okay, cool. What are you going to do with your time then? You're going to do
mhm.
this. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. If you just really drill down, I think most men will end up in some similar conclusion. So I eventually said, well, I'll just cut out the middleman and I'll just go straight to the source and get paid to do that. Uh, and it also seems ludicrous. So
Mhm,
if I can pull it off, it'll be a funny story to tell. And I'm telling it right
mhm.
now. That kind of works.
Of course, man. Of course, man. It's funny how like you were able to divert that and take the skills because most people might like walk away and try to leave it there and just like, I'm working on something new. But you're able to kind of tie in everything you have and then build out your content around it, build out everything from it. Because like, was there any issue with you leaving, let's say, the industry? Did you face any pushback from people, or was it even a reputation thing? People said things to you.
You know what? I got lots of hate from the industry itself, and I still do to this day.
Mm,
I get lots of hate. Not so much from the guys, oddly enough, because the guys are all kind of like, because anything that I say about like kind of male female dynamics, um, female nature, these kind of things, what you might call um,
mhm,
red pill dynamics. The women in my industry do not really appreciate that. They don't really. They kind of hate that. The guys kind of get it, but the
mhm,
guys keep their mouth shut. So rightfully so. Like, because if you don't keep your mouth shut, you'll get your career destroyed, and you will never work again. That's literally how it
mhm,
works. So, and I knew that. I knew that was the risk I took. I knew, like, once I saw some traction with this kind of with my online business, I was like, okay, I like speaking my mind. I like free speech. I like not censoring myself, and I see potential here. So I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to burn the bridge because I know the
mhm,
moment I start speaking my mind, and this is exactly what happened. I'll get bad reputation. People will start trashing me, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'll happily take that trade off because that gives me freedom. That gives me integrity. I can actually say what I think, and for me
mhm.
that's very very important. So yeah, that was kind of the process of that transition, and I actually still shot a little bit after I initially launched, but to this point, it's probably been like 2.5 years since I've shot uh, any pornography. So I'm officially like retired and repenting, you could say.
Hmm. What skills did you take from it?
You know, one of the best ones that I took from it was putting your foot down and like speaking, like having boundaries. Oddly enough,
Mm.
so when you start, and I'll explain why that mattered or how that came about. Because when you go to a porn set, right, and you're working with a director for the first time, as the guy, like the whole scene doesn't work without you. So you have to make sure that your body and your mind are exactly where they need to be to perform. So that means uh, not letting anyone get away with bullshit. That means
Mm.
not letting a director bully you around. That means not letting a director uh, try to force you into like working a certain way or under certain conditions when you know that that won't lead to the best scene and you'll struggle because you want to
Mm.
give your best performance at all times and you want him to have a great end product. So it's like, okay, put my foot down. No, we're not going to do it like this because of this and this reason. Instead, we're going to do it this way because then I know I can give you a better scene, a better performance.
Mm.
And to me, that was one of the most universally applicable takeaways I got from the industry was that ability to like enforce boundaries and know what works best for you, know your own strengths, and
Mhm.
mitigate your weaknesses. It's kind of like a high up concept, but it applies like universally across all business. And then I guess the other big thing I learned from it was the aspect of networking. I was only able to get into the industry was because I understood how to network my way up a chain of
Mm.
like a reputation chain, you could say. So I started with very very small studios, very like amateur studios, and I kind of leveraged that experience to like work for a slightly bigger one, and then so
Mhm.
on and so forth until I ended up shooting for like the biggest companies on the planet, like Brazzers, Evil Angel, Kink.com. And that skill set of understanding like because that was a strategy that wasn't accidental. That was very deliberate and planned the way I did it. I literally had like a spreadsheet of like all the companies I wanted to work for, I knew I could work for, where they were based around the world, who the directors from what I could gather from Twitter, who were the directors that shot for them, and then who were the girls who'd shot for those guys recently, who I might have some connection to through someone else I've worked for. So I
Mhm.
created this kind of like network map of the entire industry, which I then used to like systematically penetrate the industry, you could say.
As a little pun. But man, that's fucking sick because like that's the exact same as podcasting. Like that universal skill is
It
like
is. Why do
you
you think
as in like
why do you think I've been on so many podcasts? It's the exact same
exactly.
skill. Yeah.
You earn your stripes, you know what I mean? You work your way up slowly and slowly but surely, like inch by inch. I think people outside of that think that that's like I don't know, it's like wrong or something, to see like that's how the world works, but that's literally how the world works. Is that you
Yeah.
start
There's,
networking
there's,
with more
there's nothing
people, and
wrong
more
with
people,
that.
more people.
There's nothing wrong with um, that like it's a fair
Leverage.
exchange of value. That's all it is.
Mhm.
You know, I don't know how you could conceive that being like. I mean, it's unfair. It's not like not everyone's treated equal. No, not everyone's treated equal. The world isn't fair.
Absolutely.
Nature sure as hell isn't fair.
Yeah.
One of my favorite pages on Instagram is called "Nature is Metal," and
I know. I
it's
know it,
basically
man.
just all these videos of like animals eating each other.
Yeah.
Like a seagull eating a pigeon or something like that. Stuff you
Yeah.
would never
Yeah.
normally see or expect to see, and it's just the brutal, raw nature of reality. And I like saying that because it reminds me, like, well, one of my own mortality, and two
Mm.
of like just how like easy and comfortable our lives really are compared to the way that they would naturally have been.
Mm.
Life is naturally a struggle and a competition, and if we
Mm.
forget that, then we start to lose.
100%. That's the perfect example of if you're complacent, you're going to get eaten alive. If you're not
Yeah,
moving forward and putting everything into something, someone's going to come up behind you and fucking take that girl, that client, that customer. That's the nature of this shit. And I think I've
yeah,
noticed this even with my own business, people like poaching clients and just being like, this is it. If I don't adapt, get better,
yep.
that's what's going to happen. It's going to happen to you, you know? I want to
So
ask
true.
you about how other people can network. So of course, like I have a podcast, your own stuff, whatever. It's easy to kind of not easy, but it's easier. How would you how would you advise like the average person to build that network and start befriending the likes of Sterling Cooper?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not everyone's going to be doing a podcast circuit. So I'll try to give you like a more kind of universally applicable answer. And I think one of the best skills you can learn is not coming across as a fanboy to someone
100%.
that would be a good connection to have. To someone who's like let's say a step above you on the ladder, right? To someone who might be able to introduce you to someone else, to someone who's important in your industry, right? Because one of the things I was very proud of myself of when I first, was another example from porn, just for context. When I first moved to LA, I went to a few industry events and networked and stuff, and I was never starstruck by meeting any of the big names in the industry or working with any of these big name women. I never played the fanboy and I was never starstruck because I knew that I'd earned my place to be there. Like if I'm being hired for this job, then that means I deserve to be here. So there's no reason why I should look at this person that my co-star as like some mega star and like put that person on a pedestal, right? So that's a similar situation. And I've hung out with numerous men over the last few years who are, let's say big YouTubers, big influencers, big Instagram people, whatever, who have giant followings. And the number one thing that will make those kinds of men want to hang out with you is simply by not putting them on a pedestal, by treating them normally, treat them like a regular human being, relatable human being. That will make such a massive impact because basically everyone else that comes up to them is treating them like a fanboy and trying to take something from them. That's the energy you feel, and I can explain it because I get it myself, right? That's kind of the energy you feel when people come up to you like that. It's like they're trying to take something from you. They might be well-meaning, and they might be very, very happy and pleased to see you, but they're trying to take your time, or trying to take your energy, or trying to take your advice, or just trying to surround themselves with your energy for a little bit, just to try and like maybe uplift themselves or motivate themselves or whatever. And it could be, like I said, it could be well-meaning, but it's still this kind of leeching, taking kind of energy is the overall feeling, right? So you want to try and flip that and be a guy who gives energy to an interaction. If you can make somebody laugh, bro, it's one of the best skills you can have is by being charming and funny is is like a power networking skill. And I know I'm making that sound very easy and simple, but treating people, not putting guys on a pedestal like that, recognizing that they're human, relating to them as a human being, and relating to them, even if they aren't your equal, relating to them as though they are, shows a certain level of like self-respect that they will respect.
And it's almost like you can get to that level. So whether you could be 15 years younger than you, but you're kind of moving towards that stage, I think is really important. And I think even when I was speaking with Justin last week on my podcast, he was saying that him and Andrew, they don't always agree on stuff, and that's a big reason why him and Andrew became friends, and Tristan and yourself is because in that kind of brotherhood, you're openly not necessarily agreeing with everything, and that kind of levels the playing field versus just like kissing ass 24/7.
Totally, 100%. I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah, that's the ability to actually disagree with somebody respectfully,
Respectfully, of course, of course.
and present your counterpoint, present your reasons why, or whatever.
Mhm.
And then be open to being proven wrong too.
Of course,
Yeah,
of course, man.
that's what men who respect each other are totally okay with doing that. And they're not
And
kicking ass and putting everyone on pedestals.
and if you're wrong, it's not the end of the world to be wrong, as long as you're like, okay, I'm wrong about this. Like, it's not like a personal
Yeah,
attack. I think that's the main thing. Is like if you're actually secure within yourself, you don't give a shit about being wrong. But something, oh, put my hand up. Sorry about that. I thought of something. Now I've been proven wrong. Happy days,
yeah.
Um,
You'd rather be successful than be correct all the time.
100%, man. 100%. What is it? It's like people who are always right are like miserable. It's like people like identify like it's, I don't know what it is. Like people identify that it's a solution can be the most wealthiest, in that scenario.
Yeah, because like you're not. People will protect their ego by trying to be right all the time and not opening up that possibility of them being wrong. Because if you are wrong about something, then it's the potential to learn something new. There's the potential to grow there. If you haven't figured this little thing out, if there's something you're missing, whatever the skill set might be, okay, that's room for growth. And everybody I know who's hyper successful, they are just constantly trying to find ways to improve and grow all the time. And they're open to that idea of being wrong. And oddly enough, I think that is one of the might be a bit of a segue, but talking about like the whole COVID-19 thing that happened, right? The whole pandemic
Scamdemic.
Scamdemic, good. For sure. I'll like use the words. That whole scenario. Because people were I was trying to figure out like what's the pattern here between the people who like bought the lie and the people who saw that it was a lie. Like what was the deciding factor? Like because it wasn't religion, it wasn't politics, it wasn't sex, it wasn't economic status. It was like I couldn't like what's the common thing? What's the common thing? And I finally figured it out. It was the ability to admit you were wrong. That was what decided. That was what separated people. The people who at some point realized it was bullshit, realized that it was a lie, realized that they had been manipulated and lied to, were able to admit, oh, I was wrong. They got the better of me. They manipulated me. Now I can see through the lie. Versus everyone else who couldn't admit that they were wrong, just have to keep playing the charade over and over again. They have to keep believing it because they're so deep into it now that they can't admit that they were wrong.
Man, that was the ultimate litmus test of like actual human psychology and people's like actual like ability to be moved, because you had a bunch of people who literally became NPCs and then just were controlled by society. And it's the perfect example. And what's funnier is the fact that now that it's all over, like people have just forgotten about it because you were told to forget about it. I actually was literally taking like a piss like an hour beforehand, and I thought about this. I was like, because I was watching a video on NPCs and I saw this, and that's why I put two and two together, and I was like, people are just going through their life, whether it's like you need to have that I don't know, perspective whereby you can actually control your own life. Otherwise, someone else is going to give you the plan, to give you the goal, to give you this, and man, life is going to pass you by. Like if you didn't make a decision to leave the porn industry, fucking hell, you'd be still doing gangbangs right now.
Yeah. It's you've really got to like. I like that what you just said. You got to take life by the balls, man. It's just okay, like because for me that was like a phase of my life. I was like, okay, I wanted to prove something. I wanted to test myself. I wanted to do this thing that was very challenging. It was definitely fun. I'm not going to lie, super fun. But it wasn't like a fulfilling thing. And there was room for growth. There was obviously room for growth. There was room for me to do much more. And I like to think that I finally found kind of like I went through this like path of degeneracy so that no one else all these young men don't have to really like I went into the lion's den and took out all the lessons, and so now I can give them to like I literally give my teachings to like a virgin, and they're able to implement them straight away. Like I've literally had guys who are complete virgins and they have sex with a woman for the first time, and she thinks he's not a virgin. She's like, she doesn't believe him when he tells her. Like bullshit, you wouldn't have known how to do this and this if you were a virgin. Lo and behold, he's watching my material.
Can you earn that confidence? Do you have to earn it, or can you learn it?
It's a good question. Obviously, the confidence is going to be stronger and deeper and more ingrained if it's learned through experience, if it's been tried and tested. But sex is a learnable skill like anything else. And so if you have a game plan, if you have an understanding of female psychology, of angles, of the little buttons you can press on the female body, if you have that understanding going into a sexual interaction, even if you aren't very experienced, it will give you a lot more confidence, which will make the experience better, which will make your performance better, it's a positive feedback loop, which will then give you more confidence in general for the next experience.
Hmm. Is it confidence towards life as well, though? Because can you build it up in other aspects of life and then bring it into with relationships, with dating and everything? Because I think that's where a lot of people fall down, is that they haven't really accomplished anything. You might look at someone and be like, they haven't done anything with their life, therefore they'll struggle in these domains. Where I think, like, if you fucking work hard, build a business, get fit, okay, the lowest hanging fruit, get fit as fuck,
Yeah.
and then bring it into your career, even if you're working 9 to 5, and then from there, then you can bring this into a relationship.
Yeah, I think confidence leaches across from different areas. Like
Hmm.
if you're really fit and you feel great about your body, well, you're probably going to go into your business and with a lot more confidence and direction and self esteem. Vice versa, if you are very very good at making money, well then if you're going to the gym for the first time, you're probably going to attack it a lot more aggressively than someone who, you say, isn't successful in another area of your life. Does you, when you know a woman's body better than she does, man, like you walk around with a certain swagger, you walk around with a certain look on
Hmm.
in your like when you make eye contact with women, they pick up on it instantly. It's a sub communication. A lot of subtleties in your body language, but so that confidence does bleed across, definitely.
Hmm.
Now, does being good in bed means you're going to make more money? Not necessarily. Like, but they're all little components that kind of they create a foundation for your self esteem. So there's like the three main parts of life are health, wealth, and relationships, right? So
Hmm.
if you have a little bit of competence and confidence in the money making field, in the health field of your life, and then in relationships or the bedroom, okay, then that's a solid foundation, right? But if you've only got one of those, or maybe only like two of those, then there's a gap in the foundation. So it's harder to build that self esteem kind of structure higher and higher and higher.
Hmm. Over time, man, it's like you need to build up those own individual pillars. It's like they're all individual pillars, and then over time, then
Yeah.
you can bring them into like a relationship. I wanted to ask you about a clip I saw from you that you said you mentioned you managed some OnlyFans models.
I did it
Yeah.
very very briefly.
Yeah.
Just yeah, not only for like a summer. So yeah, no, I'm not super super experienced with it. I dabbled in it.
How was the experience?
It wasn't really for me.
Yeah.
It's something I'm glad I did the experience because I learned that my skill sets are not people management, and that business is entirely people management.
Hmm.
My skill set is in building systems and like automations and processes. That is actually my skill set.
Hmm.
So it was good. I'm glad I did that so I could double down on that strength of mine and not. And now I know, okay, that's a weakness of mine. I need to delegate that to somebody else in this aspect of my business. You know what I'm saying? So
100%, man.
yeah, but it's very much it's also kind of like, to be honest, you have to kind of be a bit psychopathic
$100%.
to succeed in that business. Uh, yeah, it's dark.
From a management perspective or from the model
From the
perspective?
money making, from the monetary side of things. Yeah.
So I recorded a podcast with Sadia Khan last week, which was just uploaded today, and we were talking about like the impact of like OnlyFans and porn like on men's brains and shit.
Oh yeah.
And basically like so I've had guys who manage models on my show and stuff, and like some of the people, the individuals that are buying, are like husbands, kids, married, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
And like her effect is like the long-term effect that it's happening on having on men is like literally destroying their perception of like what a partner could be like, or what even someone like they could have sex with can be like, because it's a skewed of what they can buy online. Like, what would be your kind of thoughts on that? Because I know you've
Yeah.
learned these lessons from porn as well. All that happens
Bro,
on men.
I completely agree with that take. I mean, it's you'd be shocked to realize how many young men think that OnlyFans is some kind of dating app because they treat it like it is. They treat it
Trying to
like
meet up with people.
yeah, like they'll literally, they'll come across a girl on Instagram or on Twitter or something, subscribe to her OnlyFans, and then like, oh, if I pay her this much a month, I can at least talk to her, and then maybe one day this will turn into a relationship. They literally think that this obviously like like monetary exchange platform is somehow going to lead to like an actual relationship.
Mhm.
So they're kind of like deluding themselves in that regard. But I agree that it's if I could snap my fingers and change something about the world, the one thing I would snap my fingers and I would get rid of internet pornography. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't think that porn was anywhere. near as damaging to society as it is now when it was DVDs in an adult film store, where you had to go in, show your ID, show you're 18 years old, you buy a DVD, you take the DVD home, or you buy a dirty mag and you take that magazine home. Guys in my generation, we grew up without internet pornography. We remember guys in my generation grew up with like that. We found your uncle's dirty magazine stash and you like ripped a page out of it, and that was like your masturbation material for your entire teenage years. Now you got kids who get exposed to their first exposure of pornography is like around like 12
10.
years of age, 10, 12,
10
13.
years old.
That's typically done by someone else showing them something on a phone at school too. And that is insane. This is a dangerous experiment we're running because we do not know the ramifications that this stuff will have on developing brains, right? We already know that, things like TikTok, things like Pornhub, like we know how badly they impact the brain, the male brain, and like its dopamine circuitry, its risk reward circuitry, just kills your motivation, kills your drive. That's in the adult brain. What's it doing to like developing teenage brains? What's the long-term ramifications of this going to be in like 10, 20 years time? It's going to be horrific. So yeah, if I could literally snap my fingers and get rid of internet pornography, I would.
And a kid's brain isn't really fully developed until like 21. So imagine how much it's being like pulled in the opposite direction and pretty much being destroyed during that way,
Yeah, it's horrible.
How difficult would it be to break that cycle of porn or OnlyFans? Like, what's the strategy you kind of help people with in terms of like unwinding their brain? Because like this dopamine fucking like adrenaline, like cocaine effect, like has to stop at some point,
Yeah. Well, so think of it this way: like all of these things, like porn addiction, like incessant scrolling on social media, even bad food consumption. These are all linked to like short-term, like gratification. It's basically an aversion towards long-term gratification, right? So you want to be able to, we want people to cultivate long-term gratification strategies. So how do we get guys off porn? How do we get guys off these bad habits? Well, they're all very, very much related, right? So let's say if a guy's worst vice, if his biggest problem is porn addiction, well, I'd actually tell the guy, okay, start by actually cutting back on your social media use. Let's find a low-hanging fruit that we can target. Maybe it's sugar consumption. Maybe it's better for this guy to. The first step is like, okay, let's cut out all like sodas and sugary foods. Let's start there. Okay, and then let's maybe cut back on his like social media consumption. Delete TikTok, delete Instagram, whatever he needs to do. Okay, and then he might find that he starts to have a bit more self-control. He has a bit more. His dopamine receptors have a little bit of a gap. There's a little bit of a relief there for them to start to reset and him start to not have that that hamster wheel cocaine addiction kind of effect. Okay, and then he has to start learning to like wean himself off of the pornography, right? And the kind of the game plan that I typically give guys, people rarely do very well with things when they go cold turkey. It can work for some people, but the only people it tends to work for are those who have an extremely good motivation and like discipline in the first place. So if you're already a hyper disciplined person, you're not likely to find yourself in this situation anyway, right? So people with low discipline, I personally think they do better if they don't go cold turkey and instead they strategically like decrease the stimulus, right? So let's say he has habitual porn use. Okay, how do we reduce that stimulus slightly? Okay, we make him set a rule for himself that he's only allowed to open like one tab. Like he's only allowed to watch one video when he masturbates or whatever the fuck, right? And he does that for a week. And then the next week we say, okay, he's only allowed to masturbate to like an image. Instead of a video, it has to be an image, right? But he allows himself that. And then the next week he weans off again and he's like, okay, now you're only allowed to read an erotic short story instead of looking at a photo. And so eventually over the course of like a month or two, we've slowly dialed down the stimulus, the effect of that stimulus, to the point where, okay, now he's actually using his own imagination. So that's infinitely better than where he was before. And now we can get him like, and now the next step, we just get them to completely get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Stop the masturbation entirely. I do believe that like guys are way better off when they don't jerk off.
100%.
Do
You
I?
mean completely? Completely?
Yeah. Do I believe that no fap gives you magical mystic powers? No.
Sunning your balls? No? Sunning your
It doesn't
balls?
make
When
it.
you're in there?
There's actually evidence to support getting sunlight on your testicles. There's actually documented evidence for that. So I'm not going to shit on that. I like walking around my apartment naked. It's just because it's my apartment. So like, screw it, I'll do whatever I want. But does it help? Like going back to the nofap thing, does it help you? Absolutely, because it's so intimately tied to like your drive and your motivation. Now, is it hard if you do not have any options in your life, like no dating options, no abundance of women? It makes it infinitely harder. It's very easy for me to sit around here and say, "Oh, stop jerking off, have sex with women instead," because I have women in my life. It's a bit easier, right? Versus a guy who's like a virgin or a guy who doesn't have much success in dating, telling him to like, because that urge is always going to be there as a guy, right? And you got to channel it into something productive. Channel it into the gym, channel it into your business, making money, or channel it into talking to beautiful women, actually grabbing yourself by the balls and walking up and saying hi to a pretty girl when you see her on the street. Because that will ultimately lead to like the end goal of having a girlfriend or a wife and a family, So you might as well direct that energy into where it is kind of intended to go in the long term.
Setting like proper ambitious goals, like vision board kind of style goals as well, because now you're doing an unwinding process, and that's very, very like strategic and step by step, which is sick. But you can equally have like those fucking mega goals whereby you're not going to be jerking off because you need to be like in the gym, or you need to be working out, or you need to be working on your business or meeting people. I feel like that like people might not have the options, and no options like in terms of voices of life, not even to do with partners, means you're going to go down this fucking terrible path of trying to get the cheap dopamine.
Yeah, that's all. Because so let's look at like long-term gratification, right? Long-term gratification is like I grind on a new business for months and months and months. Like it sucks.
Years.
It sucks. And then eventually I get like my first sale. And it's just like, yes, you feel amazing. And that's when your brain hits you with a ton of dopamine. That's how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be that grueling. It's supposed to take a while. Because dopamine isn't necessary. But what people get wrong about dopamine is not actually like the reward like hormone. It's more related to like the journey. It's more related to like the effort
Anticipation.
it's releasing, right? So you actually should feel better working towards the goal, and your brain should be, if it's working properly, your brain should be giving you little incremental bits of dopamine as you're pursuing a goal, rather than looking for like cool video on TikTok, bang, 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 right? So cultivating that long-term gratification. If there was like a list, like a bullet point list of things that young men should like work on maxing out, it's like delayed gratification, discipline, and like extreme ownership. Like everything is your fault. Everything is your responsibility. Everything in your life. I think if you master those three things, bro, you're gonna crush everybody you come across in any aspect of life.
How do you take more ownership?
Well, you can't ever label yourself as a victim, even if you are a victim, even if objectively it was someone else's fault, even if, like, whatever your scenario is, even if objectively that guy screwed you over in a business deal, even if objectively that girl dumped you and she actually is a bitch, like it was needless, it was baseless, right? Even if that is objectively the truth, you still have to take responsibility and own it, because there's always some way you can take that lesson, or take that experience rather, and turn it into a learning lesson, and ask yourself, okay, well, what could I have done that would have created a different outcome? How could I have avoided being taken advantage of by that business partner? How could I have avoided getting into a toxic relationship with that woman? What what do I know now that will prevent me from repeating this mistake? It's these early warning signs, it's these behaviors, it's these red flags, whatever it is. So you can't learn those lessons if you don't take responsibility. So if you don't take responsibility, then you can't improve and you can't avoid those conflicts and those problems in the next time they come around. So you have to take personal responsibility for every single aspect of your life, no matter what happens.
And you can only really control the controllable as a result, because every input is necessarily controlled by you. And I remember the first time I read Jocko Willink, like the extreme ownership, this like fucking literally changed my entire way. I like changed life. Like 17 years old, 18 years old, the first book that I kind of read on this. And 10 years later, or however long it's been, he was on a podcast recently saying that there's never been any event that's happened to him that was his fault. That was someone else's fault. It was always his fault. Whether it's his wife or whatever, it's
Yep.
always been his fault. And look at how far he's coming with Navy SEALs, how far everything's happened. And all through those life, even when he was in war, if
Yep.
something happened and someone unfortunately died, it was all, and that's the most extreme case of fucking human interaction. It's always his fault.
I love Jocko Willink, and I think that's a book everyone should absolutely read. His story is incredible.
Mhm.
And think of that for a second. Like, someone who's maybe new to that concept of extreme ownership, right? They might look at that and think, surely that would be a depressing way to live, right? Everything is your fault. But look at Jocko. He's a very, very happy guy. He's an extremely happy guy. And the reason why is because because everything is his fault, because everything is your fault, you have control over your life. If it's the opposite, if certain events in your life are not within your control, that actually leads to depression and anxiety, more so than taking responsibility and taking control of your life. If XYZ is someone else's fault and it had nothing to do with me, well, that means that someone else, an external force, has power and control over you, which is never a good feeling. The opposite of that is a far more empowering feeling, the feeling of taking responsibility and being ultimately within control of your life.
And man, isn't that so interesting to observe, like where you're at, where Jocko's at, right? And hopefully where I'll get to at one stage whereby that's flipped the narrative of how society always tells you that it's not your fault, it's okay, like have the fucking cake, take it easy. And then as a result, then when something happens, like this pandemic, as we were joking about, like it's not your fault, and you have to take the salary cut or you lose your job, whatever. But when you don't do that, everything else becomes available. You can earn more money, you can make more money, you can have a better life, better relationships, you have more partners or whatever fuck you want to do. But it's only when you take control of your actual life that's ever going to happen. But that's
100%.
literally against what you've been told though, since you're like a fucking kid, because
Yeah.
you do the group projects, it's not your fault as a kid, you go up and up and up and continuation. And that's why I actually love individual sports. So my background, I played a lot of rugby when I was younger, but I also did athletics, 100-meter sprinting, and I loved it because when I won, it was me. When I lost, there was no one else to blame.
Yep.
It wasn't the coach's fault, it wasn't the shoe's fault, it was fucking my fault. I was 14, 15 learning these lessons, man. And that's why, like, as I've kind of gone on and kind of built up my own business and stuff, you win and lose literally on the line, and that's the fucking beauty of it. Same with you, man. Recently with fighting.
That's it, man. It's a great lesson, man. I was the same. I played basketball my whole life, and it was a team sport. And it wasn't kind of until I just started hitting the gym, and that became like an individual sport in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Where you start to reinforce those kind of beliefs of like, okay, everything's my fault. I'm not a victim. This is like the outcome that I get is a direct correlation to the effort I put in. It's all down to me and what I do when I hit the gym, when I walk in those doors. So I love that. Yeah.
Why did you start fighting?
I picked up fighting a couple of 2-3 years ago now. I actually picked it up. It was funny. The first time I walked into a boxing gym was in LA. I walked in. It was actually Manny Pacquiao's gym in LA.
No way.
Enough. Walked in, found a trainer. It's an amazing Haitian guy, and we had one lesson. And then the very next week, the lockdown hit and the gym closed. The very next week. And so I was sitting around like with nothing to do, and I had this trainer's number. And I'm like, hey, bro, I'd love to keep doing lessons with you because I really enjoy myself. And then we just spent the whole lockdown period, like for like a good 6 months, just going to the park next to his house and training. And so that's where I started to learn boxing. And then once I got, became, got to meet Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, and joined the War Room and meet War Room members and stuff. Started sparring a lot more. Going to meetups and sparring with other members, and then eventually last year decided to do my first like amateur white collar boxing match, and that was an amazing experience. And it was because I did it because I know that when I have a son, I will highly encourage him and basically force him to do combat sports, primarily boxing and probably jiu-jitsu in some kind. But I'll make him do a combat sport. And so I won't be able to look my future son in the eye and tell him he has to get in the ring if I haven't gotten in the ring first.
100%.
So I have to do it. And I did it at the age of 35. It was not prime years for a fast reflex sport like boxing. But I did it, and I'm very, very grateful I did it. I did a 2-month like fight camp, boot camp here in Marbella. Just grinded away, like got into the best, like the fittest I've ever been in my entire life. This is fitter than when I used to play basketball in high school, like state level basketball. I was pretty fit then, but I was getting ready for this fight was the best my cardio has ever been in my entire life. Very, very grateful for my trainer out here. He's amazing. And it was a very, very, I'm so glad I did that experience. Very transformative. And the feeling of winning a fight is, you cannot compare it to anything else. It is literally probably at this point in my life, the single greatest feeling I've ever had was like raising my hand in that ring, and that entire evening celebrating it with my friends and my brothers, like that victory. It is going to be hard to replicate that feeling. And now I completely understand why guys become professional fighters and why they like dedicate their entire life to a sport like that, even though the money is shit. Obviously the physical ramifications are bad, like you get brain damage, you get injuries, blah blah blah. The training sucks, no one likes the training. But it's the feeling afterwards of the win that is just irreplaceable. So before I did it, I didn't understand why would you commit to this? Why would you do this as a career? This sucks. As I'm going for the boot camp, I'm thinking, it's like, why would anyone want to do this for like years? This is horrible. And then then the fight happened, and I get it now. Now I get why you would do this.
Man, you know what I love about that is the fact that you really do lead by example. Like, you're not the advice giver; you give your actual experience. So I ask you, like, how was the experience? You went, did the fight, and that's so like rare. Sometimes people are the advice giver and they haven't actually gone and done it. But the fact that you've learned the lessons from it, and now you can give this to future generations. It's just a small instance of what you'd be doing, but it's like you've been there and through it instead of just dishing out advice. Dime a dozen, you know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, a lot of the advice I give out as well is also things that I try to correct myself on. Like if I see myself slipping in some way, shape, or form, like whether it's diet or something with my lifestyle, something I know that I need to start like implementing myself. I'll use Twitter for this a lot. For example, like I'll deliberately like give that advice out so it kind of reinforces in myself that I need to do it more. Like if I'm not, because no one's ever going to be perfect. Okay, you're never going to be 100% perfect on every single thing you should be doing. You're never going to eat perfectly, exercise perfectly, like etc. Right? But we can always aim to be better. So whenever I find myself lacking at something, and I start feeling like I'm a bit of a hypocrite, that's when I tend to like formulate that into like an idea, formulate that into like advice that I would give to myself. And then I also, while simultaneously giving that advice to myself, am giving it to my audience.
Yeah, and it's a personal accountability. Some people kind of need it in different doses, you know. You mentioned Andrew and Tristan. How did you meet them? Was it through the War Room?
I met them through Twitter, actually.
Really? The early days?
Yeah, bro. Yeah, the fun days before Elon. The early days. Yeah, met him through Twitter. Had Tristan on my YouTube channel, interviewed him, and then they invited me out to the last night of a War Room event. It was like a cocktail. Everyone was just hanging out at a cocktail bar, and I was very privileged, actually. I think I'm the only person to ever. I got invited to like an event that without being in the war room. It was kind of interesting. And I got to meet like Andrew and Tristan, and I met a bunch of other guys in the war room that night. Justin Waller being the other one. All these guys in that first night who are now my friends still to this day. It was an incredible experience. Like to have that. That's from again one of the most significant moments of my life. Like literally, like about half a dozen guys I met that night. I've been very, very good friends with for the last like 3 years. It's amazing.
What do you think the common trait is there as to why you're still friends?
What's the common trait?
Yeah, like so what's the thing that's kind of bound you together? Is the fact that you're quite similar? Is the fact you're mission driven?
Right. It's it's again. I don't mean to talk about COVID so much, but going back through that time period, right? There was a point in my life where I thought, "Am I crazy? Am I the crazy one? Like, am I nuts for thinking this is bullshit? Am I because I was living in Los Angeles at the time? Everyone was believing it. So I'm sitting there thinking like, and there's no one else I'm talking. There's only one other person on the planet who I was talking to at the time, who's my best friend, who was agreeing with me and was like calling the bullshit out. So think about that. Like one person that I know that I'm interacting with in the entirety of society is agreeing with me. And I'm like, I must be insane. Surely I'm insane. And then I meet all these guys who not only didn't believe that bullshit, they're like every other aspect of their worldview aligned with mine, basically. Obviously not 100% perfectly, but very, very, very close. And that was a relief. It was like, oh, this is where everybody else is. This is where all the guys who think like me are. Like they're all together in this like one community. It's like a global network. This is amazing. And now I went from being somewhat of a lone wolf and only really having like one or two close, very, very close friends. Bro, now I've got like there's at least 20 guys in my phone right now who I could, if I'm in any problem, like financially, physically, whatever, like I can call them up and they can help me out, and vice versa. And it's like real, true brotherhood, true friendship, like where, like we said before, we can disagree on stuff. No one's gonna give a shit. We're still gonna be friends afterwards. We're on the same mission. We have the same worldview, the same kind of values. And I cannot believe that I went through like 34 years, 33 years of my life without it now. I'm like, damn.
How do you build that with other people?
Join the war room.
Brotherhood.
I'll tell you to do, bro.
Of course, man.
Yeah. But if you don't have access, you don't have obviously it costs money. If you don't have the financial means to get into it, you can find. How do you find other like-minded guys like that? Well, the internet is an amazing thing for that. The internet is actually incredible for that. I'm very, very lucky to have met a lot of YouTubers and influencers and stuff. And you'd be surprised. Successful people tend to be very, very nice people. They tend to be lovely, charming people.
100%.
They tend to think for themselves a lot. They tend to be very, independently minded and question authority and pro-freedom. These are all the kinds of values that I look for in friends. And they tend to have a good sense of humor. They tend to, because they can't take themselves too seriously. Otherwise, they couldn't deal with the daily stresses and criticisms of being a quote unquote influencer or whatever. So, how do you find people like this? Well, the first step is to have standards for have your own standards and have your own goals and ambitions, and be an ambitious person and work towards that. And then look for either physical communities or online communities where like-minded men flock. And
100%.
do your best to go to in-person meetups, connect with people online, even if it's initially just like online friendships and online social circles. That's fine. That's better than nothing, right? But it's always better in real life.
But when you start sharing your thoughts, whether it's on Twitter, like you used it in early days, or whether it's fucking Instagram or whatever, you'll attract people who have the exact same thoughts as you. You might attract some fucking dumbasses too at the same time that don't like it, but that's even better because you segregate it, But I remember in the earlier days, like I've been recording for 2.5 years, the people that I'm friends with now are on similar missions. That are hosts or they're fucking entrepreneurs or whatever, and we literally just turn it into like a massive friendship. And it's funny because like all the friends you had in the past, these are actually your actual friends. Like the previous ones were just when you were trying to pretend to be someone else. But you just you learn your values. You know what I mean? Like I can see your values. I can see it from your videos. I can see it from our conversation today. it's inevitable, especially in long form in particular. You know, it's inevitable that you see mine and vice versa, and over time, you're just gonna find that fucking network. You know.
Totally. Yeah, that's an interesting point you made. Like, and it's unfortunate that a lot of the friends that I had through high school and maybe actually not necessarily high school, but definitely a lot of the friends I had through college have kind of faded away. It was actually funny when they over the last year I got a few messages from friends from my college days who were warning me about who my new choice of friends, which I
Oh, for
thought was
fuck's sake!
very very amusing. Uh, yeah, that basically that guaranteed the end of a friendship there. When someone comes to you and says like, "I'm worried about you, man," uh, take that with suspicion. People, if someone is trying to, this is just a bit of context, a bit of a rant, but if someone's trying to, if you let's say you're improving yourself and you're doing well and you're getting better and you're growing as a person, right, and you're starting to correct, maybe you're expanding your social circle too. You will find old friends who are not doing anything with their life, who are not growing, who are not, you know, pursuing anything. They are going to come to you and they're going to say things like, "I'm worried about you. Are you okay? You've changed." What that actually means, what they really mean by that is, you are making me feel uncomfortable about my lack of ambition and my lack of success. So I want you to stop doing what you're doing because it's dangerous to me. That's what they actually mean when they say that. But they disguise it. They guise it in this sympathetic facade, in this facade of actually caring, when in reality all they do is care about themselves, and they're trying to like pull you back a bit so they don't feel as big of a piece of shit about themselves as they do right now. So yeah, unfortunately, I've had that happen a couple of times over the last couple of years, but I am extremely happy with the men who I consider to be brothers and friends in my life right now, and yeah, I couldn't. It's night and day how just being able to speak freely,
Mm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
being totally uncensored with your thoughts and your ideas around other brothers, it really helps build every aspect of your life, man. It's kind of metaphysical in a way, but your self-esteem improves, like your thinking improves, your problem solving improves, like every aspect of your life improves just by being able to speak freely.
Mm. And man, you can think a lot bigger too. Like I think the funny example there, but you said it with college students is very similar with Ireland to Australia. It's called small poppy syndrome, whatever it is.
Tall poppy syndrome.
And they're happy when you're one step ahead because you can kind of give them a lift up. But when you start going off, it's completely gone. And I've seen that continuously with like people that were my friends. But obviously, the second when things start taking off, they're the ones that aren't supporting it. So if a good litmus test, if you launch a business or you launch an idea or you start doing something online, the people that support it and can like, oh yeah, like here's a couple of things you can adjust to make it better, versus the people that ghost you. And that's the ultimate thing. Like I imagine like, Andrew, Tristan, whatever would help you with your businesses, want to see you do bigger. Be like, oh, you're only doing 50K, you can do 100K a month, you can do 150K a month.
Oh, bro.
And they push you towards it. And that's the biggest thing I've learned from like this like network that I've kind of built, is the fact that, and they don't disparage what you're doing right now, but like I literally was speaking to a guy last week who was like, yeah, we're doing like 125K a month. And in my head, I was like, think bigger,
Yeah.
like vision board, like not saying like I need this to do this, but it's like eventually I need to start thinking like this. Otherwise, what are we doing? You know what I mean? I might as well get a fucking job and just earn 100K a year and that's it.
Yeah, but that's another big aspect of it, is when you surround yourself with other men who are really high achievers,
Mm-hmm.
your goals and your ambitions like automatically jump up, because otherwise you feel like a piece of shit. Like you said, it's like I saw it, like I thought I was doing good, and then I get into the war room and I hang out with guys in the war room, like, God damn, I'm nothing. I need to like
You
really put.
realize you're in gear one. You're in
Yeah,
fucking first gear.
even though objectively, statistically, I'm in the top 1% on multiple different categories, multiple different statistics, right?
Yeah.
Not just monetarily, but like a bunch of other stuff in life, right? Let's say I'm in the top 1%, but then
Genetics.
you get around of other guys who are in that 1%, and you're like, oh, he's in the top 0.5. Oh, he's in the top 0.1. Oh, he's in the top
Mhm.
0.01. And you have to keep going up, because it's just like when everyone else is going up like that, you don't want to be the guy that's staying still and staying flat. So you just got to keep trying to innovate and keep trying to find ways to grow.
And I think something that can kind of hold you back with that as well is like actually your partner. Like if you're with someone who's not part of that journey, if you haven't found the right partner to be like to allow you to step up, because some people like want the comfort, they want the hug at the end of the day, and they want to just take it easy. So like before we finish up, I want to ask you on like how do you select the correct partner so that you can go and do these things?
That's tough. I think there's kind of two different scenarios that guys will end up in. One, which is a very, very good one, is like if you have your partner at the beginning of your journey and she kind of supports you on that rise up, then she is not going to kind of be resentful of your lack of time, because she's seen the progress. And she's part of the journey, and she's part of the result. So she gets to go along with that, along on that journey with you, right? Because she's been there from day one supporting you. That's a very, very good woman. I wish every guy could find a woman like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's obviously a bad situation where the woman would say, maybe, and this is probably more likely when you're kind of like a little bit on your journey, and then you encounter a woman, and you get together with each other, where she will kind of feel resentful of the lack of attention and time you're dedicating towards her, which you are dedicating more towards your business and your goals and your ambitions. And unfortunately, man, like you kind of have to be a bit cold and very discerning and decide, okay, well, what do I want in life? Do I want to cuddle up on the couch and watch Netflix every night? Or do I want to build a legacy? Do I want to build an empire? Do I want to, do outrageous things? Do I want to have big, hairy, audacious goals? Which is it going to be? Because most people are going to pick the Netflix and chilling on the couch. Honestly, that's what most people are going to pick. So it's your life, man. You can do whatever you like. Do whatever you want with it. I don't care. Like you can put your dick wherever you want. You get to choose who you end up in a relationship with. But if you really have a true goal, if you really want it, then you'll have to be very discerning of who you partner up with and who you let into your life, because you have to be aware that some women will they'll just get jealous of the time and attention you're giving towards your other goals and aspirations. So she has to kind of know from day one, hey, like this is the journey I'm on. I would love for you to come along for the ride. I'd love for you to be a part of this empire I'm building, a part of this legacy I'm building. I'd love for that to happen. But if you can't handle the lack of time and attention that you're going to get as a result of that, if you can't see the vision, if you can't see where this is going to end up, which is going to end up in a lot of time and location and monetary freedom for both of us and the family we're going to have eventually, if you can't see that, if you're too selfish and too short-sighted, you can't see the long-term vision, and you don't have the faith in your partner, well, then it's not going to work.
And I think people accept their current circumstances, like the difficulty it is, paycheck to paycheck, difficulty with their mortgage, difficulty with everything else, because of the gap, that fucking difficulty gap of, all right, we need to do this to get here. The outcome is uncertain, but they're willing to take the certainty of the shit job, the shit money, instead of the uncertainty.
Oh, yeah. You know what the irony of that? That's a good thing you've said there, because I want to jump in really quickly. So people think that a paycheck is certainty and a paycheck is the safe option. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, as a guy who has paid people's paychecks, not in this business I'm in right now, my previous business with this meal delivery business, right? There were weeks when I wasn't sure if I'd be able to pay them. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're receiving a paycheck, someone above you is paying you, and the entrepreneur that's paying you, there's uncertainty in his ability in the cash flow. There's always some uncertainty and risk in like his ability to maintain the cash flow and pay out the paychecks. So it's like, it's not actually safe. It's an illusion of safety, the idea of a salary and a rate and a wage, because the company you're working for has uncertainty and risk built into it. It's just higher up the chain. It's high enough up the chain for you to bury your head in the sand and forget that it exists, but it still exists.
You're conditioned, man. 100%, man. You're conditioned to think that that's what's going to happen. I think the funniest part about this is that the more senior you become, and like take it from someone else for context, worked in the startup world, I worked in the scale up world, I worked from some of the biggest fintech companies in the world, and I made decent money. And take it from someone who's literally done it, not like someone who's just pissing on it. They say that like the more senior you become, the more risk of you being cut. Because if you're in the bracket of someone who's managing of people, you can be easily replaced.
Mm.
So when tech layoffs come in, it's well, let's clean up 100K. Let's just delete it from the spreadsheet. So you'll be eliminated as a result. Whereas actually people at the bottom actually sometimes can keep around because if they're just like, let's say an engineer, a junior engineer, whatever, we can just squeeze the shit out of them.
Yep.
So you have more risk. So now you've taken on a house, a family, a mortgage, kids, and you're replaceable. And you've left all this time to build leverage. Like you have leverage. I don't yet, but I will. It's like that in between period whereby you're trying to get as much experience as you can to create leverage to do different things. Um, that's kind of that's security. That's the
Yep.
irony. It's the inverse of what society has told you once again,
Yep.
which has not been the point of this conversation, but it's literally proved to be like when you do the fucking horrific grunt work for a decade, you have escape velocity at that point.
Yeah. And like I mentioned earlier that like, okay, I've had a quite a lot of success in a relatively short time frame with the business I'm running right now, right? But the only reason that that was even possible is because in my 20s, I grinded my ass through like manual labor jobs, but like a million different careers, and I ran like 2 to 3 different businesses, which a couple of them absolutely sucked, and I learned a ton of entrepreneurial lessons from them. And then my last one that I ran, which I ended up selling, again, it sucked, but I learned a bunch of entrepreneurial lessons from it. You don't forget that stuff. Like all the risk that I took and the lack of success. Like while I was in my 20s, just grinding away, trying to make a business cash flow, all my friends from college were working cozy, like 6-figure jobs in like Deloitte or for the government or whatever. And I look like the dickhead, right? It's that 10 years of like, which I'm so grateful for now, which I probably didn't really recognize at the time. It's those 10 years of actually developing skills, and their deep mental skills and problem solving skills and ways of looking at the world, which have allowed me now to have a far more exponential path in this business. And actually, I was reminded of that recently. I had a family member reach out to me, and he's seen my success. Older family member, or cousin of mine. Hopefully, he doesn't see this because I hope he doesn't. It'll make him a bit sad, maybe. But it was basically, he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, I don't want to end up in the bad financial situation that my dad is in. I want to be able to look after my partner and my kid. I want to be able to pay off the mortgage, but I'm working like a wage job. I'm working this shitty job, and I've been stuck in this job for like 8 years, and I don't really see anywhere going." And I looked at that, and I'm like, what do I tell this guy? He is like 40 years old, and it's like, okay, well, when I was busting my ass, going through uncertainty, taking risk, learning all these entrepreneurial skills that I just mentioned, you were like taking the easy route. You were being comfortable.
Drinking beer at a fucking bar and all weekend.
Whatever. And I'm like, I'm sorry to tell you, man, but you're 10 years behind. If you want to have what I have, or even a fraction of it, you should have started like 6 years ago. You shouldn't be asking now at 40 to be like, okay, how do I fix it now? Because the work needs to be done. Like the skills need to be built. And it's made me incredibly grateful for all of the risks and all at the time, what seemed like dumb ideas that I pursued. They'd be incredibly grateful that I did all those dumb ideas.
Everything you fucked up, man, has contributed to where you are today. You know what I mean? Every single thing you messed up on.
Absolutely.
And I want to finish up on that point. I want to say a massive, massive thank you. I really, really appreciate it. All the wisdom, man, every insight you've ever given, all the videos you do on YouTube, man. They've really helped me, and they've really helped other people. And I've been hugely influenced by people like yourself, Justin, Andrew, Tristan, has put me on the right path, I think. And I want to say a massive thank you.